Satnam. Learning to become self-reliant. If ever there were a time in history that we've needed to become self-reliant, well, we're in it. It's been forced on us because of the pandemic, but nevertheless, we need to learn to become self-reliant. Some of us have adapted very well to it, some of us have not adapted so well, and then some of us are in between. Good days, bad days. Yogis have a way of looking at things. You can go out and you can chase everything that it is you want in life. You can work really hard and go get it and bring it all into you. Or you can do it the yogic way. And the yogic way would be to get your body, your psyche, your emotions, your mind to vibrate at a certain frequency to allow the universal energy to come into you. Very, very similar to how like an antenna works. All of these waves are coming all the time, and all we need to do is just tune the dial just enough to get the right frequency. You get the right frequency, and what you end up is you get to listen to what it is that you want to, or to watch something on television. There are frequencies that we're tuning into, and this is what this particular meditation helps you to do. It helps you, just like an antenna, to tune in to a particular frequency and allow that frequency to come in to you. You become the receiver. Make sense? You become the receiver. The universe is always amplifying everything out. It's always sending it out. It's always giving out this information. Question is, are you tuning into it? So, do it the way a yogi would. Allow the universal energy to come to them, or things to them, or life circumstances to them, or people to them, events to them, versus the go-getter who chases everything. Maybe you get the same result, but the yogi has a very calm way in which to do it. So, we're going to do this meditation. It's a little bit physically challenging, so prepare yourself. It's not that hard, but you will tune your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul. Every part of you will tune into this particular vibration so that you can receive the blessings of the universe. Okay? Let's do this. Let's tune in. Adi mantra. Om Namo Gurudev Namo, that we recite as a way of showing gratitude, as a way of connecting to our higher self and to that universal energy, so that we can gain wisdom. We can come out of the dark and step into the light. Sit tall, chest out, chin in, close your eyes, relax your shoulders, keep your palms together at the center of your chest, and take in a nice, long, slow, deep breath. And then exhale that breath. Another long, slow, deep breath in. And then exhale that breath. And then we breathe in to begin Om Namo Gurudev Namo 3 times. Recite this with me. Deep breath in. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Inhale. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Last time, inhale deep. Om Now inhale very deep and hold the breath. And exhale. All right. So I said to you that we can act like antenna, and we're going to do that physically. So physically what we're going to do is we're going to spread both of our hands wide apart, and you want to have as much tension in your hands as you can the entire time. So you're going to spread your hands wide, and you're going to make them strong as steel, strong like nails, Yogi Bhajan said, strong. So you're going to do that the whole time. What we're going to do is we're going to bring our arms up to the level of our chest so that we form a nice parallel line with the floor. So you've kind of got like this little L kind of thing going. And what we're going to do is we're going to, for about 5 inches or so, you're going to jut your arms forward and backwards. So we're going to be doing this motion, just this back and forth. And this is going to create a nice rhythm, as you'll see in a moment. Your spine's going to start to shift forward. And though it may look challenging, it's really not that bad. It's really not that hard to do. Now we're going to be listening to what's called the prosperity mantra. And it is the 8 aspects of the universe. And you're going to hear some words that you may or may not be accustomed to. Gobinde, Mukande, Udare, Apade, Hariyang, Kariyang, Niname, Akame. And before each one of those, we're going to be saying the word har, H-A-R. We're going to say that 4 times. So it'll be har, 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 Gobinde. Har, 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 Mukande. And I'm going to be playing a musical CD by Niranjan Kaur and Guru Prem. And in that, we'll just follow along with it. So do the best you can with it. And when you say har, H-A-R, it's more closely pronounced to hud. And the reason for that is because when you say har, what you do is you take the tip of your tongue and you touch the top of your palate. So when you say har, it's not har, it's hada, because I'm taking my tongue and I'm touching the top of my palate. Hada, 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 hada. That's closer to what it sounds like. Again, it sounds like hud, H-U-D, but it is H-A-R. And what is that? That is a punch. That is a power. That is a way to say, all right, we're connecting to this and we're tapping into all these 8 aspects of divinity. Tapping into them. Sustainer, liberator, enlightener. There are many aspects of this. 8 that we're doing. I'm not going to go through them all with you, but the words that we'll be using to vibrate, that's what mantra is, a vibrational shift that happens within you. So from your spoken word, listen to what you're doing, listen to how you're pronouncing it, do the best you can, and muddle along until you get pretty good at it. Even with me, even though I know this mantra very well, I always stumble along the way. So you'll hear me stumble more likely than not. Don't worry about it. We're all going to just keep going. We're going to do it for 11 minutes. We're going to have our eyes closed. I'm going to do this for 11 minutes. So arms are going to come up with our fingers strong like steel the whole time, and we're going to come forward and backwards about 8 times. And again, you're going to start to see that you're going to get this seesaw motion sort of thing going back and forth with your body. Okay? 11 minutes. Let's do this. Let's just turn on this. Let us connect. And here we go. Yep, sure. Here we go. Come on. There it is. All right, here we go. 11 minutes. Strong like steel. There's a little build up, about 30 seconds of this building up. Eyes closed. Again, we're only coming forward about 5 inches or so, okay? But hands strong like steel. So sit up tall, chest out, chin in, keep the elbows up, keep the hands strong like steel. We're gonna come back and forth 5 inches or so as we recite what's about to start. Sit tall. Hara 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 gobinde, Hara, 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 mukande. Your hands come fast. Look at my arms for a sec. See how they're coming? Hands strong. Hara, 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 yang. Hara, 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 kari, yang. Hara, 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 nename. Hara, 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 akame. It's like you're cutting down a tree. Have some fun. Hara Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Pare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Pare. Keep your arms up. Elbows up. Hara Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Kame. Hands strong like steel. Hara Hara Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Pare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Keep going. Hara Hara Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Akame. Keep your arms up and keep the rhythm steady. Try to match the forward motion with har. Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hands strong like steel. Make them antennas. Each finger is an antenna. Make them strong as steel. We're trying to tune in to this universal energy through our body. Tune in. Tight hands. Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Akame, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Keep going, you're doing good. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Upam. See? I'm messing on the words. Let's keep going. Hara Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Akare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Shoulders up, elbows up, fingers tight. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Just a little more. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Apare. Hara 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 Govinde, Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara Hara. Hold on, break. Keep going. Yes, you're going to sweat. Yes, you're going to feel it in your shoulders. But you're tuning in to the universal energy by doing this. Being antenna. Strong fingers. Hara 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 Mukande, Hara 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 Udare, Hara 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 Apare, Hara 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 Hariyam, Hara 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 Kariyam, Hara 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 Niname, Hara 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 Akame. Hara 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 Gobinde. Hara 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 Mukande. All right, now stop. Inhale deep. Squeeze everything. Tight, tight, tight with the hands. Tight. Squeeze. Pull up tall. Sit tall. Chest out, chin in. Squeeze. Squeeze the shoulder blades back. Squeeze. And now cannon fire through your mouth. So through your mouth, breathe hard. Now breathe in deep again through the nose. Hold and squeeze. As tight as you can with your hands. Separate the fingers. Tight. Squeeze everything. Tight, 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 tight. Hold, 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 hold. Hold, squeeze, hold, squeeze, hold, squeeze. Now again, through your mouth, breathe out hard. Last time, inhale deep. Hold and squeeze. Tight hands, tight arms, tight everything. Squeeze, squeeze tall, sit tall, sit tall. Chest out, chin in, sit tall. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Hands apart. Last time, breathe through the mouth. Relax your arms. Sit quietly. Keep your hands on your knees. Sit quietly. Catch your breath. Just sit. Okay. Yes, it is a little bit physically challenging, but again, you're looking to gain that vibration, the vibration that comes from the universe. When you can take your hands and you can separate them and make them strong like steel, as you're coming back and forth in this seesaw motion, you are tuning your body into that vibration. You are allowing things to come to you. So like I said in the beginning, it's not without effort that the yogis just sit back and wait. You need to tune in. You need to raise your vibrational level to that of the universe so that you can connect to that universal energy. And that is one particular meditation that you can do. And you can allow things to come to you. You become self-reliant by using your own ability to tap into what each and every single person, thing on this planet has the capacity to do, which is to tap in to that energy source that is available to all of us, but not without effort. Use this as you do the other meditations. Experiment with it. Use it for your daily practice. Share it with others. As always, I wish you very well. Sat Nam.